you have to leave the stereotypical never cut a tree, wilderness area oriented environmental movement in order to actually embrace true forestal ecology, which is that it is always in some point of a cycle of succession.
Welcome to another episode of Beyond Labels. I'm Dr. Stina McCullough, and I'm here with our favorite farmer, Joel Salatin. And today it's Joel's Day. This is a question for Joel from one of our listeners, from Samantha Waterloo. She says, "Hi there, I have a question for Joel. What is your take on forest thinning? Is it beneficial? We have a family property with 80 acres that are mostly wooded, and it has gotten so crowded that no light is reaching the ground. There are a lot of dead trees, but many of the trees are alive, but with only leaves at the very top where the sun reaches it. I started thinning all the dead trees out in a small patch in hopes of starting regrowth, but I wanted to make sure this was indeed beneficial." Okay, Joel, what do you think? Forest thinning, is it good?
Oh man, this is one of my favorite topics. You know, we're known for our pastured livestock, but anyone who really knows me knows that my favorite tool is a chainsaw, and I get really excited when I get in the woods. So I love trees, I love woods. I go up and hug trees all the time. But you know, trees have a problem. Trees get old and die too. They're just like the rest of us. They don't live forever. And probably one of the most important aspects of ecology is realizing that it's never stagnant. No ecosystem is stagnant. It doesn't sit. It moves. It changes. And so in a forest and in general in ecosystems, what we have is either succession or regression. So it's succeeding to something better, or it's regressing to something worse. You know, imagine a stagnant pond, for example, a pond that's got a bunch of whatever manure and stuff in it. It is regressing to a place of stagnation that's not good. A pond that is full of salamanders and frogs and cattails around the edges and is clean is succeeding and moving to a to a better place. And so that's the way ecologies are. And that's why when we come to the woods and we come to the forest, it's all about where we are in any given successional cycle. The thing is, in trees, the cycle is so long. You know, in a pasture or in your lawn, in your garden beds, okay, you know, you can see succession there really quick. But in a forest, you don't see that succession very long, because it's often, you know, a multi-decade actually succession. So I don't know where Samantha's from. I'm assuming she's from east of the Mississippi. Let's just assume she's east of the Mississippi. And the reason I'm making that distinction is because some of what I say applies more to the eastern United States than the western. When you get into the western and the far west, and you get into the you know, the coniferous forests and the redwoods and all that, so there are nuances. And as you know, in this podcast, nuances is our middle name. You know, we're constantly dealing with nuances, and so I just want to make that distinction of east of the Mississippi and kind of, you know, out into the very arid areas. So let's think about it this way. What determines the vegetation is light. Light is what determines the vegetation. So there are a lot of species that require full light, and a lot of them that can live in shade. For example, a conifer requires full light to get going, and an oak tree, a deciduous oak tree, is happy with 50% shade. So in a successional standpoint, that's why, for example, coniferous forests do better if they're burned or clear cut to restart than deciduous forests, where you can kind of pick and choose and take trees and leave ones, and new ones will come on, because in a deciduous forest, the trees can grow happily in quite a bit of shade. And so these nuances determine what a given patch of forestal terrain is going to look like. So if you're in an 80-acre wood lot, that's a lot of woods, it's great. You have that nice wood lot, but it's so thick and it's real dense. Realize that every acre will only grow so much biomass. Well, how much will it grow? It's called DBH, diameter at breast height. So you have to hug the tree, and see what the diameter at breast height is. And you can get, I suggest if you want to work in your woods and you enjoy them, get a diameter tape. It's a cool little tape measure, unlike the ones you see down at Lowe's. Instead of a flat 90-degree angle on the end to catch the end of a board, it actually has a hook, and you can hook that thing in the bark and pull it around, and the tape gives you an automatic diameter reading. So the inches look like they're that far apart, but it gives you diameter. And so the most of the woods in America, including out west, have become extremely weedy. The Native Americans, let me get a little bit of history here. The Native Americans, they didn't like dense woods because you couldn't see who was creeping up on you, to rob your tent or whatever, or take your kids. And so they didn't like dense woods. And in fact, the first Europeans who came to America wrote back to in their diaries. They said, we could take a European continental army and march it from the Atlantic Ocean to the Mississippi without any roads. So the tool of the Native Americans, of course, was fire, and they would burn routinely, because for the Native American, it was more important to have prairie, which brought elk and deer and bison. That was more important than trees. Trees were important, but the animals, you can't eat a tree. And so in order to stimulate animals and food, they wanted to as the number of trees. And so generally, the eastern United States, pre-European, was a magnificent silvopasture, widely spaced trees, almost like a park, if you will, widely spaced trees and grasses that then created an openness in the landscape. I think that's really important. That's like the first step in leaving the stereotypical, me, I'm the Christian libertarian environmentalist capitalist lunatic. So part of that's environmentalist, but you have to leave the stereotypical never cut a tree, wilderness area oriented environmental movement in order to actually embrace true forestal ecology, which is that it is always in some point of a cycle of succession, either becoming over mature and needing to be rejuvenated, it's becoming weedy, it's it's too much junk, that sort of thing. And so the rule of thumb is to maximize the amount of stem square footage. In other words, an acre of forest will only produce so much square footage of DBH, of diameter at breast height. All right, it'll only produce so much, and it can be in little, a bunch of little sumac bushes. It can be in, black gum, kind of a junky tree. It can be in dead stuff. It can be in good material. It can be in, green maple, red maple. I mean, there's a million different things it can be in. Some grow into timber, some don't. And so the rule of thumb is that you want to thin down a forestal zone to where you take the diameter of a keeper tree. So you go through it. I like to go through the woods And when I don't have the chainsaw and I've got time with some survey ribbon, and I like ribbon more than paint, because if I change my mind, I can put a ribbon on. If I change my mind, I can rip it off and put it on somewhere else. Whereas if I paint a tree, so I'm gonna keep this one. If I change my mind and say no, I'm not going to keep that one, then I can't erase the paint. All right. So I like survey ribbon, and I just walk through and with my diameter tape, and I select the trees that I want to keep. They have nice form, good timber, that sort of thing. And the rule of thumb, the silviculture rule of thumb is you take the diameter in feet, you double it. So if you have a 7-inch diameter tree, times 2 is 14, and you convert that inches to feet. Okay. So 7 inches in diameter times 2 is 14, convert it to feet. And you go out 14 feet from that tree, make a circle, and cut everything within that circle. You don't want to cut more than that, because if you do, too much light comes in. Every deciduous tree, now not so much with conifers, but with deciduous trees, every tree has thousands and thousands of dormant buds up and down its stem. Those buds are stimulated by light. What keeps those buds from sprouting is shade, is the canopy over them. All right. But if you shock it all of a sudden and open up too much light, then it'll all those little sprouts will sprout, and they're called epicormic sprouts, epicormic sprouting. And probably you've seen this like on I don't know, maybe a housing development that you go by, and people go, I want to keep the tree, you want to keep as many trees as possible. And maybe it was a woods, and they converted into a 50 house housing development. You go by, 3 or 4 years later, and all those supposed nice trees that they left when they did it are now all fuzzy and got little sucker and branches on them. That's called epicormic sprouting. It destroys the trees. It's unhealthy for the tree, and the whole thing falls apart. But it's caused because all of those dormant sprouts on the stem suddenly got shocked with too much light, and they sprouted. And so this formula that I'm giving you, this radius times 2 converted to feet, is the formula that allows you to thin carefully enough that you don't get too much light suddenly shocking into the nice trees that you want to leave.
Thank you for joining us on Beyond Labels. Our mission with this podcast is to make it accessible to everyone.
But we are behind a paywall because the issues we discuss are often subject to censorship. We've run into that, and so we have an extremely modest paywall to let us have the freedom to discuss the kind of issues we want to discuss in the way we want to discuss them. And you can become a member and enjoy all this content by clicking on the description box below. We look forward to having you join our family.